Back working on the F250 again today. Just trying to put it back together and clean up the stuff like this. Just silicone poking out of everywhere. This is not how you're supposed to do that. Too much silicone, way too much silicone. I bet there's a very large number of engines that wouldn't blow up every year if people just knew how to use silicone correctly. AKA not too much. Also cleaning up the parts and just taking the time to put a little paint on them to, you know, at least pretend like we care. Well, I actually do care about this, but whoever worked on this thing before, because that's a new water pump and it was just nothing but surface rust. So I had to scuff that a little bit when I washed it down. The timing cover had like 2 layers of old paint on it that were all flaking off because it was never prepped right. Really, it'd be nice to blast these, except I don't blast water pumps because you can get sand or blasting media down inside of this little orifice here, or down past the seal, or even inside where it can tear up the seals and then it'll cause it to leak. With the timing cover, that's a lot less of an issue. It's just I don't have a blaster here to be cleaning up like that. So I just scrubbed it really well. And then my trick for trying to get paint to stick is actually taking the torch and heating them up before spraying paint on. That way it dries immediately. So it's still kind of a mess out here, but I've got the timing chain swapped. Probably didn't actually need a new timing chain because it's about the same amount of play in there as the old one, which was probably a fairly new one anyway. I did manage to get the pan off. I got a new gasket on here, and I took the oil pump off to basically take it apart, clean it up, check that pickup, and there was quite a bit of just chunks of stuff that came out. Not enough to really be what was causing my low oil pressure issue, but there was definitely some old crusty gasket and silicone in there. So it's good to have that out. I did check that bypass valve that I talked about in the previous video, which was moving freely. So the only other thing would be if, like, at the real far extent of its travel, it was getting stuck before, and then when, you know, things fixed themselves, it freed up just from use, which would be pretty great. I mean, I did put some stuff in the engine to try to help free sticky things up, and, you know, rings and everything else. So maybe that's what the issue was the whole time, was just that sticky valve, but now it moves super freely. I also took the time to put new motor mounts in, and if you've ever dealt with these style of motor mounts from Ford, they are a huge pain in the butt. You literally can't take them out without lifting the engine up and removing at least one of those brackets off of the crossmember. I took the passenger side one off. So that was, you know, 2 bolts up here. Oh, camera focus. So it was 2 bolts up here and then 2 down on the bottom to be able to loosen that thing up, and then everything was still really tight where you had to wiggle the whole engine around with it hanging from the hoist. Just to be able to get those out of there. And then of course lining them back up was just as much of a pain in the butt, but I was able to get it done and then get the oil pan put back on too. Like I said before, the oil pan will not come off with the engine sitting in place. So I mean, I was only able to lift the engine maybe 2 inches at the most before the transmission bottomed out on the trans tunnel back there, and I was really kind of stuck. But it was just enough to get the pan to drop down and unbolt the oil pump and then pull the whole thing out. And then same thing for reassembly. Had to get it up in place with the oil pan down about 2 inches. You had enough room to get a ratchet and a wrench on there to tighten the oil pump back up. So at this point, it's just reassembly. I mean, nothing too special. I'm probably not going to film a bunch of it. The only real thing of any consequence coming up was still this oil filter adapter that just, it makes it really tight, and I think it'd be actually a lot easier to just have the oil filter straight off of the block. I don't know why the adapter was on the trucks for whatever reason on that. Maybe I'll find out before I can actually get it fit, but basically it had this big bolt that goes into the block. It seems to be the same threads as this, so maybe I can take this out. However, I'm worried about screwing up the threads and then not being able to go backwards if I have to. So I'm going to see if I can get this oil filter adapter where it can just screw it in and it's got a hex to go onto the block. That would be really nice, actually, just to simplify that. Otherwise, I'll just make do with that one for now, just to get this truck back together, because I really would like to enjoy driving it around this summer. Alright, so holding the oil filter up to the block, there's tons of room if it just goes to the block and I can skip this adapter. So I'm just stealing this threaded piece out of the adapter for the oil filter to actually screw on. I figured holding it in the lathe was better than trying to clamp onto it with a vice grip, so now I've only put tiny little flat spots on the threads instead of totally chewing them up. And yeah, this whole thing can just go in the trash. I will, however, need to cut down, because this is the one that came out of the block. And this part sticks up too high, but there, the threads are the same. So I should be able to thread this in and then TIG weld it or something to lock it in place on the back side, and then I'll be able to use this as my oil filter adapter and run it straight onto the block. The gasket sizes are exactly the same, so that's not going to matter. I just need to modify this and make sure that it's positively attached to here so that I don't like start threading a filter on and then this just walks in farther and then all of a sudden I got no threads holding the filter, and you know, a bunch of bad problems that way. Now if you're wondering why I'm modifying this adapter and that there should be something available, there is something available. It's also anywhere from $20 and up. And then I gotta wait several days and hope that it actually fits, because I saw a lot of reviews that it didn't actually fit the filter because it had a totally different thread, so the standard oil filter didn't match. I'm just gonna skip all that by modifying this right now so I can have it today and I can make sure that my original filters still fit. So here's my finished adapter. Just gave it 2 tack welds. Well, I mean a little more than a tack weld on the back. That's just to keep this from threading in or out. Originally, it got like snug. I thought, well, maybe it won't matter, but actually if it would have threaded in further, it probably would have ran out of thread for the filter at some point in time. But mostly I just ended up tack welding it because it was like, well, between here and here is just another threaded connection that could work its way loose with vibration, and might as well just eliminate that because it's not going to affect anything else. So now I'll just put this back in the block and then we can mount our filter right to the block. Look at all that room for that filter. I have no idea why that adapter was on here and jamming it so tight to the oil pan and the frame down here. Like, there's miles of room up there now. So I don't understand what the reason for it was from the factory. I mean, the fuel pump should have all been up here anyway. No idea. Alright, follow up on the truck. Driven around on a couple of different trips now. Just, I mean, short stuff. They're, you know, 15-20 minute drives kind of a thing. With the work I just did, one thing that was a little bit shocking to me was it idles way better, especially when cold. It fires right up, it holds idle nice. So I don't know what was going on with that loose camshaft bolt that was messing with the idle so much. But, I mean, clearly something's different. It's not making any more vacuum as far as the EFI is telling me, which kind of sucks because I really wanted to make use of the vacuum advance, but I'm not because the big camshaft doesn't make enough vacuum at idle to offset the fact that it makes all of its vacuum and cruise, which at what point it'd be putting too much timing into it and everything would start running hot, which it's, with it being 90 plus degrees, feels like upper 90 degrees or more. It does run hot. It doesn't run hot enough to be a problem, but it's enough where, you know, it's pretty usual when in cooler temps to see 212 out of it, down to 206, you know, somewhere in that range, pretty normal. I mean, even if you stop and sit at a light, it might get to 215 or whatever and comes right back down. Well, it's getting to 230 sitting at a light, a little bit higher, and it's not coming back down very fast, which I'm sure has plenty to do with the fact that the fan shroud and mechanical fan are gone from this truck. Now, I've got a pretty okay electric fan on it. I mean, it's better than the shitty electric fans that I got rid of. In one of the first episodes, we were talking about cooling issues on this truck. So that's already been a significant improvement, but it's still just not doing it. I think part of that's because the radiator, just the bottom's exposed, and any air we've got pushing through the front is just kind of spilling out the bottom, so that's not helping. There's not really a great way to add an air dam to force air up into it, at least nothing where, you know, there's a cross member right up against the radiator that I can screw to. You know, there's just the radiator itself, which might require me to you know, weld some stuff onto the radiator. I'm not sure how committed I want to be to that yet. Big thing is I might look into going back to a mechanical fan just to make sure that this is kind of a non-issue, especially because if I get around to getting my AC working in here, that's only going to add additional heat in and be even more of an issue. I also think that getting that E4OD swapped in is going to be a benefit because it'll get RPM down on the highway. That should, in theory, help a little bit anyway. But the hard part here, I think, is that dealing with fuel and timing, it's causing it to run a little bit hot. I'm not sure how much I really trust the, you know, Summit fuel, EFI fuel injection stuff. It's just kind of whatever. It seems to be working. I can't knock it for that. It's pretty simple. It just kind of does its thing and the truck runs. But I also am not anywhere crazy on timing, and it seems like if I get above like 30 degrees of timing, it starts running hot at like 30 degrees total all in, which is where we end up around cruise at that higher RPM. I mean, like, it makes power, it pulls through it just fine, like that's not an issue, but clearly you've got, you know, something going on where it's building extra heat. You know, the big aluminum radiator should be doing its job. Of course, we've got the, you know, condenser and transcooler and everything else in front of the radiator. I don't know. It's really kind of how much customization do I really want to do versus I know if I go back to a mechanical fan and a proper shroud, it'll be fine. So I was talking about how this thing was running a little warm, and I just pulled back a couple degrees of timing because it really didn't seem to make much a difference in the way the truck was running. However, it 33, 34 should not have been too much in the first place. I backed it off to 30. But I'm also realizing that when I was looking and thinking about building an air dam on the bottom, that there's these old like tar paper cover things that aren't even clicking into the top of this grill right here, but there's holes where they should be installed all the way across here, and clearly these two are missing. So air that's coming in through the grill here can easily be spilling out and around underneath the hood here instead of going through the radiator. So that is definitely not helping. And there's more holes on the back side where there should be something over the top as well. So I'm going to see what I got laying around to try to close that off, and we'll see what kind of difference it makes. Alright, well, now that it's raining and a little bit cooler today, it's not going to be real great for doing A/B tests anyway. However, I did find the piece that actually goes in here. LMC Truck, Dennis Carpenter, and a couple eBay and a couple other places have it. And it's cheap. It's like $17 and like $8 to ship or something like that. It's less than 30 bucks. So I'm just gonna order that rather than spending the time to make something. Although if I wanted to fab it, I mean, it could definitely take a little bit of sheet metal or even some heavy plastic and make something happen here. But because it's cheap and it's the right thing, plus it's got the clips with it to pop it in just like factory, because it's a factory replacement part. So I'd rather just do that, but I also want to show you like just how much space there is where air is going anywhere other than through the radiator. So obviously we've got our gigantic holes where those parts are missing, but then over here on the passenger side, hole, like they're all over the place, and there's nothing. I mean, the radiator's all the way over here. There's nothing to keep the air from going that way. At least on the driver's side, there's not a ton of holes in the core support, but still, I mean, air can go that way, and I'm sure at some point back here it can go around and then into the fender. Just because it's not, I mean, look at all these coolers and AC condenser and the radiator, like all of that stuff, even though it's designed to have airflow through it for cooling, is a restriction. And that restriction is kind of what allows us to be able to have our cooling, but we need the air to go through it. So anywhere where we want this to be the easiest place for air to go through. And right now we have way too many places where air is much easier to go somewhere else. I mean, yeah, here's even a good shot. Look, boom, straight into the engine bay. So pretty much all the air coming in through the grill here, just whoop, straight on in. And then that also doesn't help because now we're just building a higher pressure inside the engine bay, which further reduces the wanting of the air to pass through the radiator. Now, I did take the truck to a cruise-in last night, so I did get a little bit of A/B testing as far as that timing change. It did help, although, you know, the air temperature was slightly cooler, so that could have been a small contributing factor, but basically I ended up getting stuck at a light for a really long time again, and after going from the light, well, at the light it was, let's see, it was like 206 to 212, just cruising, and then at the light it was climbing, and I think got up to 222 after leaving the light a little bit. And then really just never came back down. I think it maybe came down to like 218. But then as soon as we slowed down in town and we're driving slow, it's only a couple of blocks, and it climbed right up to 228 before I shut it off. And even from, you know, the house here out to the main road, it's only 2 blocks. And the other day when it was significantly hotter, like that, it got to 238 before I shut it off here in the yard. So I mean, that's a good 10 degrees difference there. But even just cruising on that hotter day, it was sitting at like 216, so it was running hot anyway, just trying to drive at 60 miles an hour. So definitely something needs to be done. I think the timing helped. The timing really didn't change the way that it ran at all, so I don't think the engine cares that much. I mean, really, to know, we'd have to go dyno test it and just see how much timing it actually wanted. But right now it's like 30 degrees total versus 33, 34 total like it was before. 30 is super conservative. 34 should have still been on the conservative side for this engine, with, you know, having a bigger cam and stuff like that. But it's kind of hard to know unless you actually dyno something. But the fact that, I mean, it still started fine, it still ran down the road fine, it wasn't getting excessively hot, but that taking a little timing out did help us a little bit as far as temperature. And that to me just is really kind of pushing the point home that we are not getting the cooling efficiency that we should, because we should be able to have that timing in there without making the motor unhappy and not building extra temperature. I got these new splash or heat guards up here. Been fighting with these things. They don't fit very well. I don't know if that's just a rubber thing or what. Of course, they also came with these crappy little push lock things that don't do very much locking. And I also ordered the headlight ones, like I talked about earlier, which are only this little section here, not the whole thing, which I guess kind of makes sense, but at the same time it doesn't, because why would you only want to cover up that little bit and leave all this wide open? But they came with different clips that work a lot better, which is that style versus these mangled up ones. So they're actually locking stuff in place better. But of course, you know, there's not enough of them. I got 4 left and I'm just trying to get them along the edge. I had to stick a bolt in here because the rubber hole, the holes are not lining up hardly at all. You can see it's like I'm really stretched here and here, but then it's loose and it's loose, and I mean, they're cheap parts, but I'm super disappointed with the way they fit because it's pretty terrible. And the fact that I actually had to stick bolts in just to hold these things. I suppose after they heat cycle a bunch of times, they'll harden up and not be that big a deal, but or maybe stretch a little bit, but this is kind of ridiculous. They also had to trim them to fit because they didn't fit on the sides, worth a dang. Yeah, but I mean, they're on here. They should make a difference in our cooling, so we'll have to test that. Now this alternator splash shield, different material, like half the thickness. This is probably what this stuff is actually supposed to be made out of, because this stuff's way thicker than the original. So why the difference? I don't understand. And it came with, yet again, a different style plastic clip, which looks way better suited to the job at hand for this top portion. So just, man, you'd think they'd, I mean, I guarantee the factory ones were all the same. So why 3 different styles of clips here? I don't understand. But hopefully this will fit a little bit better than the other ones. Quick little update to end this video. Been driving the truck around a little bit with these flaps in place. It definitely seems like it takes at least twice as long, like an extra mile or 2, before the truck to actually get up to temperature when you start driving it cold. I did have one opportunity to like sit at a stoplight quite a bit longer. It didn't rise in temp nearly as much or as fast. I think just because it was trying to maintain a lower temperature to begin with. It's still creeping up in temperature when driving slow though. I think that's just kind of come down to I need to block off some more of these holes that are in the core support. Should maybe try to do something around the hood latch if possible. I think we can try to put something in here to deal with that. But really, I mean, we're just kind of getting this back to where stock really was by adding these flaps in. And really, this fan is just probably inadequate for this application. Really, going back to a mechanical would be nice, but I gotta kind of source a mechanical fan. You can buy the shrouds aftermarket, can't find the fan. At least not from LMC Truck or somebody like that kind of a thing. So I'd have to look around a little bit for that. Overall, truck's running good though. I'm happy just to be, driving around on it again. I think we're past the ragged heat of summer up here in Minnesota, so we haven't been in the 90s in a couple of weeks, which is nice. It's finally comfortable out here. It's low 70s. Today is perfect t-shirt weather as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, making progress. I'm not too concerned about what temperature it's running at right now, but when I get around to doing some other work, I'll definitely take the time to block off some more openings and try to improve it, and maybe look at doing something with the fan. But I think the next video is going to be finally getting into doing the transmission swap.